Hi everyone, Susan Storm here, and today I want to explore the world of introverted intuition with you. There's so much written and expressed about introverted intuition, and there's some misconceptions about it. A lot of people I've noticed feel like they're not sure if they're using introverted intuition or not, or if they get a result like INFJ or INTJ on a personality type questionnaire. They question it because it's a rarer type, and so they wonder, did I just put in the answers wrong? Can I really be one of these rarest types? And so today I want to go into 10 things you might relate to or experiences you might have as an introverted intuitive type, as well as explain what it is in simple terms that I hope anyone can understand. First, if you're not sure who I am, I'm the founder of a website called psychologyjunkie.com, where I've written over 1,000 articles about the 16 personality types and the cognitive functions. So there's a lot of confusion about what introverted intuition is in the type community. Some people say it's just future planning. Some people describe it as being psychic. Some people describe it as empathy. So there's a lot of different ways it is described. First off, who uses introverted intuition? What types use it? INFJs and INTJs are the dominant introverted intuitive types. This is their go-to function that they tend to live and breathe without really having to notice it. The next types would be ENTJs and ENFJs. They have auxiliary introverted intuition. That means that their intuition supports either extroverted feeling in the dominant position for the ENFJ or extroverted thinking for the ENTJ. Then you have ISFPs and ISTPs. They have tertiary introverted intuition, so it's something that they lean on and that they get creative with, but it's not necessarily their most natural function. They don't have the most certainty around it. And then ESFPs and ESTPs have inferior introverted intuition, so this is a function that they aspire to use well, but often feels a little out of touch. They often feel vulnerable or uncertain when they have to use this function. So now that we know who uses introverted intuition, let's talk about what it is. So introverted intuition is a perceiving function. That means it's not what you use to make decisions, it's what you use to gather information. Unlike sensing, which takes in information through the five senses, introverted intuition, it hunts for patterns, symbols, metaphors, images that aren't obvious on the surface. Introverted intuitive types are very interested in what's bubbling up from underneath, what shows up in your dreams and why. Why do certain symbols stand out to you, and what does that mean? When someone describes something, they'll internalize a metaphor for that thing. So there's always this rapid fire release of inner images in the introverted intuitive type that aren't necessarily memories. They're not recalling concrete information like here's what I did yesterday and in the sequence that it happened. It's more about these metaphors and symbols and patterns that they're seeing that are constantly playing before their mind that give them an understanding of what something essentially means. They're not looking for what something is, but for what it means. Carl Jung, who is in many ways the father of personality type, who's the author of a book called Psychological Types, and that's where Myers-Briggs got their inspiration, says, although the intuition may be stimulated by external objects, it does not concern itself with external possibilities, but with what the external object has released within him. It peers behind the scenes, quickly perceiving the inner image that gave rise to expression. So I know that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is that introverted intuitive types are not necessarily focused on what's going on in the external world. That's not their first and foremost automatic thing to focus on. Instead, they focus on what images are released inside their consciousness when they observe things in the outer world. And it's always asking, what else is going on here? What's going on behind the scenes? What am I not noticing? And it looks beyond the tangible and the physical world and looks for the meaning behind everything in a very cosmic sense. Isabel Briggs Myers described introverted intuition as flashes of inspiration, insight into relationships, the imagination, originality, access to the unconscious, ingenuity, and visions of what could be. Introverted intuition gives us these really sudden aha moments, these epiphanies. They tend to come together like puzzle pieces in your head, where the bigger picture, the ultimate meaning of something, is gradually coming into focus. A personality hacker calls introverted intuition perspectives. Introverted intuition tends to shift viewpoints around, trying to get clearer to the ultimate meaning of something. So if you are having a conversation with an introverted intuitive type, they may be thinking thoughts about what you're saying, but then there's some part of them that is analyzing it from a meta perspective, and the introvert intuitive type might jump into other people's perspectives at the same table to try to understand how they are perceiving information. Introverted intuition is very good at slipping into a new perspective and understanding how different people would see the world. Now, this doesn't mean that they can jump from being an INTJ, for example, to an ESFP the next minute. It's not that they are becoming another type or another person. They're just trying to get outside of their own perspective to see all the different perspectives, to understand what's influencing everyone else and their perceptions. And the more that they take in these other perspectives, they can synthesize then the one, in their mind, true perspective. So I know that that can be hard to understand when you're not actually getting real life examples of it. So what I'm going to do now is explore with you 10 ways that introverted intuition can show up. If you are an introverted intuitive type, an NJ personality type, then you'll probably relate to a lot of these. Number one, you are fueled by inspiration. For introverted intuitives, inspiration is like oxygen. I think it's in the book Building Blocks of Personality type that the author says for introvert intuition, inspiration is the beginning, the middle, and the end goal of everything. So introvert intuitives constantly have these images playing before their mind's eye, and they're looking for something that's going to create a spark, that's going to create an epiphany or an insight or an aha moment that gives them further clarity and understanding the meaning of the universe. Number two, introvert intuition is extremely big picture. You probably, as an introverted intuitive type, can get really impatient with very day-to-day details unless you can tie it to something bigger picture. The more cosmic something is, the more big picture it is, the more interesting it is. Rather than knowing about the latest sale at Bed Bath & Beyond, an introverted intuitive type is going to want to know, what does consumerism mean for the world? How is this leaning toward consumerism going to affect the planet in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? So they take everything, no matter how small, and extrapolate it into a bigger picture concept or idea. I had an INTJ client one time who talked about small talk, and the way he described it was so funny because he described it as chewing cardboard. That was how unpleasant it was for him. But at the same time, if you could have a conversation about the meaning of consciousness and how human consciousness is different from insect or canine consciousness, that would really light him up. And he could go on and on for hours about that, being very inspired. So the more you can make something abstract and big picture, the more interesting it is for the introverted and intuitive type. The more tangible and day to day the subject matter is, the more it can be a little bit frustrating for the introverted and intuitive. That said, if an introverted intuitive can draw connections between the day-to-day and something bigger, then it will be more interesting to them. Number three, if you're an introverted intuitive, especially an NI dominant type, like an INFJ or INTJ, you're probably accused of being in your head or having your head in the clouds a lot. Introverts, their consciousness naturally draws inward to the world of the mind. And for introverted intuitives, to these images that are always playing before them, there's this search for patterns, for meaning and significance. And so, because of that, INFJs and INTJs especially tend to be very much in their head. I know I was accused of this all the time as a young INTJ. People made fun of me for this constantly. In my family, among friend groups, it was just a huge ordeal. In fact, Carl Jung himself said that the introverted intuitive has little consciousness of his own bodily existence or of its effect on others. The extrovert would say reality does not exist for him. He gives himself up to fruitless fantasies. To extroverted types or even sensor types, introverted intuitives can seem really detached from reality sometimes. There's so much going on inside their minds that it can be hard for them to stay really tapped into the world around them. In fact, in situations where they do have to expend a lot of energy and focus on concrete reality, that can be very stressful for them. Many INFJs and INTJs get stressed when they have to, say, drive in a new city where they're not familiar with anyone or anything, because they have to be so tuned into street signs, traffic, lanes, and all these concrete, real things. And it pulls them out of their dominant function and into their inferior function of extroverted sensing. So situations where INFJs and INTJs especially have to be tuned into all the details around them can be very stressful for them. And they would often rather be in a world of imagination. And by imagination, I don't mean, oh, what if I was a fairy and I was flying through the forest? It's more about synthesizing future possibilities inside their own mind, or looking deeper for a real meaning behind something. For example, an INFJ might be walking past a tree and they might see the tree, but immediately have images in their head of the tree as a shepherd, as a guardian of the forest and of the people walking past it. Or they might have images of the tree being chopped down in the future and what the world is going to look like in 20 years if we don't take care of the planet better. Or they might go back and think about the origin of the universe and of the world and how it all began and how nature came to take place. And in this process of having all these images before their mind, they're looking for some kind of insight, some kind of aha inspiration that the tree is unleashing for them inside their own mind. But in the process, they may not have noticed that someone walked by with a dog, that they're walking in the grass now rather than on a path because they're so absorbed in their own thoughts and in these images that are playing before their mind. Number 4, if you're an introverted intuitive, you're always trying to look behind the facade. You have a strong insight for authenticity in other people. And you're always asking yourself, what else is going on here? What am I not seeing? What is the pattern behind what I'm seeing on the surface? Carl Jung said, NI, or introverted intuition, appears behind the scenes. Quickly perceiving the inner image gives rise to expression. In plain language, introverted intuition doesn't really trust appearances. For introverted intuitive types, life is often a game of what's the real story here. They're focusing on what's going on behind the mask. Number 5, if you're an introverted intuitive type, you really need plenty of time alone to just be in your head. And when I say time alone, I don't mean to play Candy Crush or to binge Netflix or anything like that. This is one area where many introverted intuitive types are hijacking themselves in modern culture, is because we live in a culture that is so focused on distraction and these quick dopamine hits you get from TikTok reels and phone games and things like this. For the introverted intuitive type, it's so important that they get time to let their mind be still. And in that process, that's when these patterns, these insights, these inspirations are more likely to bubble up to the surface. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go hide in a dark room and do nothing. You can take a walk in nature. It's very quiet and peaceful. You can go swimming. You can go to a sensory deprivation take if you want to. But introverted intuition needs these kind of low stimulus experiences, calm experiences, so that their mind has the ability to put together these puzzle pieces and synthesize all the information they've been gathering so that they can then have these epiphanies and understand these patterns and sense where they're going. I often talk to INFJs and INTJs who describe their process as something like a slow cooker. So they have a problem that they're trying to solve. Rather than creating a bunch of different possibilities and solutions, that's something maybe more like an extroverted intuitive type would do. Instead, they put the problem in the back of their mind and then they go for a walk, or they meditate, or they do yoga, or they do something calm like knitting, and they just try to calm their mind. And somewhere in the process, at the end, there's this light bulb moment where it all starts to make sense and they suddenly get an insight or an epiphany. For me, as an INTJ, this often happens in the shower. I'm very busy because I have 5 kids, and sometimes in my day to day, it's very difficult for me to have time to still my mind and really find the solutions that I'm looking for. But often in the shower, when everything quiets down, all of a sudden it's like I get these light bulb moments where suddenly I'll realize how I need to do something, what's really going on with someone or some situation. And that's often how introverted intuition works, through these sudden epiphanies and flashes of insight. But the introverted intuitive type needs to have quiet stillness in order to get to that point. So definitely prioritize meditation, quiet, walking in nature, things like that. The more you make that a regular part of your routine, the more you'll notice that insights and solutions start coming to you. Number 6, if you are an introverted intuitive type, you trust the unconscious world. Now, that sounds really weird, but to a lot of people, they're like, what does that even mean? But what it means is that dreams, metaphors, symbols, insights that seem to pop up out of nowhere, these are things that you really trust. Many INFJs and INTJs, ENFJs and ENTJs keep dream journals by their bed and they write down what's showing up for them in their dream. And then they look for threads of meaning in those symbols, in those stories that are coming to them. Some types would say, oh, that's a dream. It's just a bunch of gibberish. There's no point in understanding it. It is what it is. It's just the way my brain is sorting information at night when I'm sleeping. For the introverted intuitive, all that information that's bubbling up is really important to them. They're looking for a deeper significance to that. The images and symbols that come to them Some of them don't seem to have a basis in reality, but they wonder, what does it mean? What is this trying to tell me? So there's definitely a trust in these images that play before their mind's eye. One INFJ I spoke to, actually, I've spoken to so many INFJs who keep dream journals, but she said that she started seeing connections between her dreams and the decisions she was making in her real life. And sometimes her dreams were pointing her to a part of herself that had been ignored or repressed that she needed to work on in order to make her life better. So through recording her dreams, she was able to gradually improve and grow as a person. This wasn't through reading Brene Brown or reading books about personal growth. She just found herself growing and enhancing her life and her relationships the more she tried to listen to what her dreams were telling her. Number 7, if you are an introverted intuitive type, you have a love of strategy. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that you always want to play chess, although for many INTJs, that is pretty exciting. You love to map today's choices against tomorrow's results. Introverted intuition is always looking forward towards the ripple effects of things. Like, this is what's happening now, and this is how it's going to play out 10 years from now. Strategy is often really inspiring for them because they can use that process to think through goals and then think about what ripple effect will get me to that goal. What's the most likely actions that I need to take in order to get to that goal? Now, in the case of, say, an NTJ, they're going to blend extroverted thinking with that. And they're going to look for, what metrics do I need to consider? What people do I need to put in place? How do I need to delegate or organize my life in order to achieve a certain objective? For INFJs, often those goals are more about personal understanding, personal meaning, or relationships, because they're blending introverted intuition with extroverted feelings. So it's, I really want to help this person. They're dealing with this issue. What sort of interpersonal strategy do I need to create in order to help them with that issue or to build a stronger relationship? Number 8, if you're an introverted intuitive type, especially an NI Dom, it can be difficult to explain your visions. So if you're a sensing type, when you're explaining something, what you're explaining is very much grounded in real lived experience and in real things that everyone can see and understand. For an introverted intuitive type, a lot of what you're grasping, a lot of the epiphanies you have, are coming from an inner place of these images that we've talked about so much in this video, these abstract senses of knowing, these metaphors. And so many times when INFJs and INTJs try to express themselves, people look at them with blank stares like, what are you talking about? Because they're not drawing on images, metaphors, symbols, and stories that necessarily everyone understands or experiences. Most people can smell a flower or see the sunrise, can touch fabrics and materials. Most people are able to use their senses. And so when you describe something in that way, it's just so easy to grasp. When you say, I had a dream that I was searching in the basement and I found a ship, and that's telling me that I need to broaden my horizons and explore new places and grow as a person, and that maybe I'm stuck in a rut. People might be like, wow, you're putting a lot of stock on this dream. There's a tendency for people to dismiss, and that can be really frustrating and overwhelming for INJs. Many times they get a little jaded because of these interactions with people where they feel like their epiphanies or insights are dismissed. So that's something that many NJs will relate to. Number 9, if you're an NI type, then you are obsessed with the why. Introvert intuition is constantly asking, what does this mean? Why is this happening? Where is it headed? It's, for example, ENTJ I spoke with just recently was talking about watching the news. And every time he watched the news, it felt like his mind was going down this rabbit hole of analyzing global patterns, future consequences, human psychology, and understanding in a very core level why the catastrophes in the world were happening and where the world is likely to go based on the state of human psychology right now and the cultural shifts that are happening in the country and things like that. Just this ability to extrapolate the most likely future possibility, but to also understand the why behind it. Not just this is where things are going, but this is why things are going in this particular direction. Sign number 10, that you're an introverted intuitive, and I'm sure there's 20 more signs I could come up with. But sign number 10 is that you tend to focus on zeroing in on one most likely outcome or possibility. If you're an extroverted intuitive type, which would be the NP personality types, they tend to generate possibilities more and find all these connections. So extroverted functions are very broad, but they're not as deep. Introverted functions are very deep, but they're not as broad. So introverted intuition tends to have all these images and possibilities and visions playing before their mind's eye, as we've talked about. but it doesn't explore them all. It lets them play before the mind, and then it'll land on one that it wants to explore really in depth. And that becomes a very singular focus, and many times even an obsession for NJ personality types. This is why sometimes brainstorming sessions can be really frustrating for NJ personality types. External brainstorming requires them to use extroverted intuition more, and that can be more tiring for them to use because that's their fifth function out of 8. When an NJ type has landed on an idea that really is inspiring to them, that they feel is the right one, then they will zero in on it and put all their attention on it. And any kind of distraction from that can feel very frustrating and even oppositional to them. They want to build the dream, the vision in depth. They want to build that world around that insight that's captured their attention. And so sometimes brainstorming sessions can feel very shallow and unsatisfying because one, they're having to rely very much on their fifth function, which feels much more exhausting than relying on their dominant function. The bouncing from one idea to another and throwing all these ideas at the wall without just fully sticking to one can feel like a betrayal of their introverted intuition, because introverted intuition is already often done this process on the inside, sorted through a bunch of ideas and gone, nope, here's the top 2 ideas out of the 500 that I've already explored here. Whereas extroverted brainstorming can feel like a waste of time to them. It can feel like, why are we talking about all this? I already know the right thing to do. And that's where that introverted intuitive stubbornness comes in. Many times NJs are known for being stubborn about what they think is the right way to do things. And that's often because of that process. They've already had an inner brainstorming process, and their introverted intuition is very good at parsing out what's a bad idea and what doesn't make sense and finding like the one insight. So when INFJs or INTJs or ENFJs and ENTJs land on an insight, they often tend to be very stubborn about this is the one right way. And if other ideas are presented, it can sometimes be seen as oppositional to them. So this is just a brief look at introverted intuition. I have written more about this. If you want to check out my website, I'll leave some links in the description. If you're not sure about your personality type, if you're wondering, okay, I don't know if I use this process or not, or I don't know which type of introverted intuitive I am, I also offer type clarification sessions. So you can talk to me through a Zoom session one-on-one, and I would love to help you find your best fit type. It's one of my favorite things to do. And so if you would like to talk to me to help get clarity on your type, just check out the link in the description of this video and you can book a session with me. I would love to talk to you one-on-one. As always, like and subscribe to see more videos like this, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.